There was a Brazilian educational theorist by the name of Paulo Freire, and he taught in the slums of Sao Paulo. And he referred to this as what's called the banking model of education. We know how banks work. You have some money, you have a bank account, you deposit it, and when you need it, you withdraw it. He called it the banking model of education because, in many cases, this is the way we treat our students. The banking model. The child's mind or the student's mind is an empty vessel. You study, you put something into that vessel. When it's exam time, you take it out of that vessel. Once it's taken out of that vessel, it's no longer there. I can tell you from my own experience that I studied political science and philosophy in university. I had a wonderful time. I can't tell you a single word of what John Locke believed or J.J. Rousseau believed because I wasn't studying it to become a better person. I was studying it so I could pass my exams. And I did pass most of my exams. And here I am now, and I can't tell you what I studied. Those 4 years of my life went by in such a blur. You know, in our current society that we like to call enlightened, we compartmentalize knowledge. Let me ask you a question again, present company excluded, because I already have your phone number. How many of your professors would give you their home phone numbers? How many of your high school teachers would give you their home phone numbers? What if you learned something in class and you wanted to ask your high school teacher a question about what you learned? Would they give you their home phone number? Would they give you their Facebook address or their Facebook ID? Probably not. Would they chat with you on Facebook? Probably not. And I know teachers nowadays get in trouble for befriending students on Facebook, so I'm not encouraging that. But the point is this. What if you learn something so profound that something inside you wants to reach out and build that connection with a professor? You can't, except for those 45 minutes a week that you're in that class, or that 1 hour a week or 2 hours a week of class where they have office hours. God forbid you should reach them at 4:55 on a Friday afternoon when they're ready to catch the train, because your ideas about changing the world will have to wait. And this is what I mean about education. We treat education like it's a light switch. You can turn it on, study, and when it's no longer time to study, you turn it off. Not only does that run contrary to our innate nature as human beings, as curious creatures that want to know as much as we can about the world around us, but it limits the amount of curiosity that we have, and it extinguishes that flame that each of us have inside us. Take my favorite example, little Johnny in 5th grade. Little Johnny loves mathematics. He could be a brilliant mathematician one day. And he's so excited to learn long division for the first time. And just as he's about to solve that first question that's going to open up a world of possibility in long division, the bell rings. And his teacher says, "Oh, everybody put everything down and go outside." Johnny, who's at that critical moment where his world could be unlocked, is told, "You can no longer study math. You have to go outside in the snow and play." And he does. Bell rings, he goes outside, he puts on his boots, and he goes and runs outside. He finds a group of people who are playing a game of baseball. And just as he's up at bat and the bases are loaded and he's ready to hit that winning home run, the bell rings. And he has to go back to class. And he goes back to another subject, being taught something by a teacher who chances are either doesn't want to be there or feels like they should be paid more money to be there. And quite frankly, our teachers should be paid a lot more money than they are now. The point is this, that scenario plays out in thousands upon thousands of schools in our country and across North America every single day, where we have children that are bright and focused and have such a deep craving for knowledge, and we shut it off because we tell them it is not time to study. I'm guilty of this myself as a parent. My son sometimes wakes up first thing in the morning and picks up a book and starts reading it. Who wakes up first thing in the morning and picks up a book? Had he picked up a baseball bat or a hockey stick, it would be different, but he's picking up a book. And sometimes it'll take an hour to come downstairs for breakfast, and my wife will have made breakfast and it'll be getting cold, and I will be angry. As the father, I will be angry. You are making everybody late. Now the question is, what's he making late for himself? He might be making us late, but as far as his development goes, he's actually doing exactly what we want him to do. He's expanding his mind. It's mandated that you study French beginning in grade 3 to grade 9, if I'm not mistaken, according to the Ontario curriculum. It's a wonderful language. It's the country's second language. Everyone should know how to speak it. Unfortunately, I never could. I spent, and I haven't done the math because I failed math, but I haven't done the math, but I would guess that I've spent hundreds of hours of my life studying French. The first French lesson I had, the teacher walked into the room and wrote down conjugation of a verb, and I remember it. It's burned into my mind to this day. I'm sure all of you have it memorized. Je suis, tu es, il est, elle est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils ont, elles ont. And don't you dare say ils sont, because that's different. It has to be ils ont and elles ont. Still not sure what that means, but it's in my mind. And that was what I learned my first day in French class. After hundreds of hours of French instruction, that's still all that I know from French. Now, it's possible that I was just a bad student. In fact, it's quite probable that I was a very bad student. But you have to question the effectiveness of a system that sends children into rooms, some of which have no windows, to study something without a mechanism for them to remember it 15 years later or 20 years later. One has to think that if that was important to me as an individual, I would have remembered it. I would have remembered all of the lessons that I had in French, but to this day, I don't. And I'm not saying don't study French. I'm saying be a good student and learn as much as you can, but question the effectiveness of a system that divides your day in a manner like that. You know, when you think about the way classrooms are today, it's no surprise that some of the greatest inventions that we've had in the last century and the greatest minds that we've developed have happened nowhere near a classroom, in places that are the furthest away from a classroom that you can imagine. Does anyone think Pierre Trudeau became a great statesman by what he learned in civics class? No. Does anyone think Sir Muhammad Iqbal or Jalaluddin Rumi or Robert Frost became great poets because of something they learned in English? Gene Roddenberry imagined a world where there was peace across our planet. And he imagined a world, an entire world, where human beings could communicate wirelessly with each other in the 1960s. In fact, earlier than that, the 1950s. He imagined a world where human beings could communicate without wires in the 1960s. He inspired millions of people, and he didn't do it in a classroom. He did it in his own time. And in inspiring millions of people today, not only do we communicate wirelessly, but we can communicate with other, in our case, people who have gone to the moon, and one day Mars, and one day beyond that. And it was all because someone imagined something, and they didn't do it in a classroom. Mark Zuckerberg went to the most esteemed institution of higher learning in the Western world. He went to Harvard. He imagined a world where we're all connected in real time, instantly, with millions of other people. That world, of course, we know today is Facebook. It's changed the way that not only we learn, but it's changed the way that we lived. He went to the most esteemed institute of higher learning in the world, and where did he come up with the idea for Facebook? When he was at home, when he was in his dorm, away from class, away from his professors, away from the rigidness of schooling. One more example, Albert Einstein, he was ridiculed because some reports say he didn't learn to speak until the age of 4. Some say he didn't speak until the age of 7. When he was in school, he used to look out the window and daydream. He daydreamed so much that his teacher said, "You need to drop out of school because you can't cut it." Imagine what would have happened if Einstein conformed and he's daydreaming. Imagine what would have happened if Gene Roddenberry didn't say, "Hey, you know what? Human beings can conquer this solar system and we can reach out into the stars." Imagine what would have happened if these things didn't happen. Imagine if Einstein was in class and he was imagining and the teacher came with the ruler and smacked it on his table and said, "Einstein, go to the principal's office." Bad, Einstein, look at you imagining all these great things. You have to study math. These things happen. Children daydream. Adults daydream. Do we have room to daydream? Do we have room to be by ourselves with our own thoughts in our modern educational system? All of this explains why good people fail. All of this explains why good students, some of the time, can never cut it. Thomas Edison, Charles Dickens, Richard Branson, Bill Gates, Peter Jennings, all of them dropped out of school at a certain point in their lives. It's not that they couldn't cut it. It's maybe that the schools couldn't cut it. The schools weren't giving them the education that their souls were looking for. In fact, millions of Americans and now Canadians are actually homeschooling, and the studies show that, there are some studies that show anyway, that students who homeschool enter university 2 to 5 years ahead of their peers. Now, I'm not trying to endorse homeschooling one way or the other, and I'm not trying to diminish the value of studying in a modern educational system. I'm only saying this, and this is what I'm coming to. There is a fundamental difference between schooling and education. They're not the same thing. Schooling is a process that's created by others, maintained by others, for the purpose of others, and to perpetuate a system that already exists that has nothing to do with your own personal goals in life. Education, on the other hand, is self-directed. It's self-guided, it's self-initiated, it's all-encompassing, and it's self-fulfilling. You are doing it for yourself and no one else. Your education has nothing to do with exams, it has nothing to do with tests, it has nothing to do with seminars, workshops, tutorials. It has nothing to do with any of those things. It has to do with making you a better person. Schooling teaches you how to be a good citizen. It teaches you how to be a good follower, a good employee. Education teaches you how to be a good human being, how to be a good father, a good brother or sister, a good mother. It teaches you how to build and create and maintain communities of caring people. Schooling involves networks of people, many of them strangers, that you interact with every day, hoping that you will learn something from them. Education is not about networks, it's about communities that you live in and experience every single day, where every person in that community has value. Schooling takes place in a safe and controlled environment, an environment where you will be monitored and you will be under surveillance, and increasingly in our urban centers where you will be under surveillance by cameras 24 hours a day when you are in that school. Education, on the other hand, happens way out in the open. No surveillance, no monitoring, in the middle of confusion. Because yes, it's okay to admit that this world can be pretty darn confusing. And that's where education takes place, not when there's a right or wrong answer, but when something is gray and you have to decide for yourself what is right and wrong, in a free-for-all where your ideas will be tested. You know, anyone who lifts weights or does any kind of bodybuilding knows that the way you develop muscles is when your muscle fibers rip. You put them under so much stress when you lift something up that your muscle fibers will rip. And it's when the body repairs itself that it builds up more strength in that muscle fiber, so the next time it becomes more difficult to rip. That's what education is. It's about testing yourself. It's about the freedom to follow your dreams in the way that you want. And most importantly, schooling tries to manufacture success. Schooling is that process whereby someone will tell you that if you have a degree, you are successful. That is wrong. I have met and we all have met many, many people with degrees. They are useless. Not the people, the degrees. Education gives you the freedom to fail. And this is key. You have to have the freedom to fail, and you have to taste failure to let yourself know that you never want to taste it again. Michael Jordan once said, you guys know that I'm a big hoops junkie, and I follow the NBA quite religiously. And Michael Jordan once said he doesn't remember all of the 63 game-winning shots he's hit in his career, but he remembers all 6,580 shots that he's missed in his career. Imagine that. He remembers every shot that he missed, but none of the game-winning ones. And that is what drives him to be the player that he is today.